You said you described yourself as surviving, and that typically means you've got stuff getting you down. So maybe that's just the low-key British thing that you've got going on, or English.
Yeah,
excuse me.
It's
Sorry.
kind of like we get confused when Americans say "Have a nice day" because we're like, well, I don't even know if the next 15 minutes are going to be all right.
That's so English.
Yeah. Woo. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to episode 89 of Third Degree, the podcast, which is brought to you by Soccer 90. The Soccer 90 holiday sale starts this weekend. You get 50 to 75% off starting on Friday, then also Saturday and Sunday. And then on Monday, the 14th, Third Degree listeners receive 40% off with the promo code Third Degree on soccer90.com. Hi, I'm Peter, and joining me today are my two good friends. First off, the always even-keeled Dan Crooke with an E. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Peter. So that sale begins tomorrow, considering we're recording Thursday.
Unless somebody downloads and listens to this on Friday, then that means it starts
Forget
today.
Them. I'm talking about me saving money here.
Yes, correct. That is
Noted.
correct. Yes, sorry. The time shifting we were talking about here is a little confusing. Yes, the Soccer 90 holiday sale starts Friday, which could be today or tomorrow or even potentially yesterday, depending on when somebody's listening to this. So, and then, of course, also joining us is your hero, my hero, and everybody's hero, editor, founder of thirddegree.net, and your definitive resource on all things Football Club Dallas, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hi, Peter. Turning 50 sucks, by the way. I threw out my back hanging Christmas lights.
That wouldn't have happened if you did it before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have been 50, but yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask, Buzz, how much of that has to do with being 50?
Nothing. I have a really crappy back.
Okay.
It was
All right.
it was the leaning over onto the ivy part that just tore it up. You know.
All right.
I'm
Well,
old.
is that like an old back injury from trying to learn how to do cryo turns back in the day?
No, if you want to know the story, I hit a tree skiing, and my back's
no.
been. I mean, nothing really bad actually happened to me, but my back's been really poor since then. You know, I can't sit in a car for a long time without one of those back roll things. You know, no big deal. Just when I did the Christmas lights, it really hurt the next day.
Well, we should all be thankful you weren't killed in a skiing accident sometime way earlier in your life.
I was thankful.
And that's the joint chiropractic, code Third Degree. Won't save you any money, but just try it anyway.
Yeah, just go to any random chiropractor and see if you could give them the promo code Third Degree for an adjustment. That would be awesome. Okay, well, this is the first podcast that does not have a game because, as we talked about last week, season over. But I do have to take a moment to express my utter amount of pure and unbridled jealousy that I have for the Seattle Sounders in watching them claw back with 3 goals in like 10 seconds to win a game that they probably didn't have much space winning. And just thinking, of course, it had to be Seattle.
Well, I'm pretty happy with that comeback just because I predicted they would win it all. So,
Did you have any money on it?
No, I just my pride of having said that they would. So it's nice to see them do it again. But it's typical. They have difference-making players and a big, solid, full roster, and they do it like you should do it.
And let's be honest, if Minnesota won that game, be like, but they're even worse than FC Dallas.
Well, I think what it did was it relieved us of the pain of knowing yet another team that didn't even exist the one time Dallas made it to MLS Cup and lost it on an own goal, and on the pain that occurs every time I think about that. Although Seattle is one of those teams too, but at least they've been to the Cup a few times and won it since then, so I don't count them in the same way.
Plus, if the team that beats you goes on to win it, or you can be like, yeah, second best. Yeah, screw everyone else.
Good point.
That's a very false feeling, Dan. We all know from last year. And I think the year before, because didn't Portland win it the year before? Or was that Atlanta?
Atlanta.
All right. Never mind then. I take it back. Okay, so since we don't have a game particular to talk about, we will get into a little bit on the team and the season, but I do think we need to go back to the real headline and the thing driving most conversation about the club, which is Bryan Reynolds pending sale to some European club, insert name here. Buzz, I think you've got some updates you'd like to share with us.
Who? Brian? Who? No. Yeah, Bryan Reynolds, all the noise. The update yesterday was that there are now 3 official bids in for Bryan Reynolds. I have permission today to tell you where those 3 bids are from in terms of what country they're from. I can't say what clubs they are, but the 3 countries, and this perhaps will be fun.
Lithuania.
Not Lithuania.
Iceland.
No, the prices on Reynolds are way past
China.
places like Iceland or Lithuania or MLS being able to afford him. The three bids that are in are from Belgium, France, and Italy. Those are the 3 countries.
I was close.
You were close. Yeah. But it's fun to talk about, and it's I'm having a great time just sort of following along with it all. It's fun to watch the people move around and posture in public, including Andre Zanata yesterday, which made me laugh. But it's, I think there's probably another couple of weeks before this thing gets done, but I still think it's done before December ends.
What about Zanata's comment about it made you laugh?
Do you want to read it to everybody?
You can, or do I have it somewhere?
Yeah, I put it in the channel. Let's see. I'm going back up. He said,
Oh, I have it here.
Yep. Go ahead.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a Brazilian accent, so I won't try that. Plus,
Weirdly, nor does he. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right, and it'll probably be deemed racist anyway. All right, where I'm from, I'm used to this. I'm used to having young players get clubs in Europe interested. We need to be open. If it's a good offer for the club and a good offer for the player, we'll see what happens. At this moment, I can tell you there's nothing concrete. We're going to keep working as if Bryan will be here next season, close quote.
All right, so what made me laugh was that there's no way he's going to be there next season. The level of money floating around, it's too much. And then the other sign
you
is...
You can plan all you want there, Zanata, but he ain't going to be here.
Matter of fact, I want you to plan for him to not be here because that's what's going to happen. Right. And the other one is the idea that there's nothing concrete. Well, 3 legitimate offers are definitely concrete. So obviously he's spinning to downplay this whole scenario. And my reaction to it is, as I was trying to think, why in the world does it help? Or obviously, he thinks it helps FC Dallas in this situation to downplay any move. Because in my brain, you want a hype move so that the price goes up if you're FC Dallas, right? So why would he want to downplay? And my guess on why you would downplay it is that if you're from a country where you have a gigantic, massive, fanatical fan base that might react negatively to, why are you selling all our players? You didn't get enough money, screw you, fire the technical director. You can see why you would want to keep it quiet until the deal's done, and then you just trot it out. Whereas
under promise, over deliver theory.
Yeah, under promise, over deliver. You don't want to get roasted by your fan base because they keep hearing some numbers that are not real. Oh, why is he going to that team? Why are we selling them at all? There's like 5 people in the FC Dallas fan base that will care enough to be upset that you're selling Bryan Reynolds for whatever you sell him for. So that's my assumption, is that this perspective comes from not being used to MLS fan bases, is my guess. So because I don't know why you would downplay it otherwise.
One of the more interesting aspects or side aspects of this whole adventure that we've seen in the last couple of weeks since you broke the news, Buzz, has been the introduction of the Juve fan base globally. That has been really interesting to watch on social media and online, and their reactions. And what you find by and large is that football fans are pretty much football fans across the board in their reactions to these kind of stories.
Well, was there any particular part that surprised you or didn't surprise you?
Well, I know, just like the immediate reaction of, oh, he's from America, so he's got to be shit. Or, oh my God, I watched a highlight reel of this kid, and he looks amazing. I watched a YouTube highlight, and he's amazing. He's going to be sign him for whatever they want kind of. I mean, it really is that incredibly wide spectrum of reaction that you would see even just, inside MLS. And I just found that. And then some of the other kind of like just the number of Juve outlets that have reacted or repeated or retweeted your report. I find all of that fascinating, and you just really begin to understand what a global brand it really is.
Yeah, it was amazing to watch both like my tweet blow up and the amount of hits we got on the website, but even like people that would retweet it without actually tagging me, like some of those tweets just got huge blow ups, and it wasn't even their news. They just swiped it, so that was kind of weird. A lot of the reactions from individual fans, of course, happen from a highlight reel, or then they watch one game, and as we talked about last week, it was the one game where he was slightly hesitant in the first half, and people were like, they react one way or another. But the way the clubs work is that once the guy comes under their radar, which in a case of a guy like Bryan, there probably have been some clubs that have been aware of him since he was 15 and playing for the U17s, on the national team stage. That gets people aware of you. And then once he made it into and I know for a fact people watched tape of him at North Texas. And then once you see tape of him in MLS against a higher level of competition, that's when they really paid attention. And the clubs that are interested in him now, they literally watch every single game to watch him play, to see how he is. They don't judge things on like a highlight reel or whatever. So these teams that are interested in him are very serious. And the reason they're interested is not anything to do with how good he is now. It's what they're looking at, and what they're seeing is the potential to what they think they could turn him into. It's the reason why Reynolds is worth more than Cannon, has to do with the fact that they think they can turn him into Alphonso Davies, whereas they might watch Cannon and not see the same thing. It's the attacking flair going forward. It's the combination of pace and size and strength and touch, the innate attacking abilities. They see a guy who doesn't really defend very well. You see a lot of that comment, right? Well, he's not a very good defender, people will say, or, whoa, he needs a couple more years to learn. Well, of course he does. I mean, he's not going to walk into, let's say it is Juve. He's not going to walk into Juve as a starter. They're going to develop the guy. He needs to learn to play defense still. It's the upside and the potential that everyone is super excited about.
Dan, are you with me that if one of these clubs turns out, and let's just say, for example, Buzz, you reported the countries are Belgium, Italy, and what was the other one?
France.
Let's just say that let me repeat it. Let me say it this way. Are you with me that it's likely the best landing point for somebody like Bryan is to go to a club in Belgium based on the fact that it's a little lower pressure and far more likely he'll start from the onset?
Not necessarily. Loans are used to great effect. I think you can look even at Jack Harrison when Man City kind of picked him off out of New York City, and they've done that 2-year loan to Leeds. He's been absolutely phenomenal for Leeds. He's under a great coach there, settled in really nicely, and at the end of this season they've got a tough choice whether they want to just sell him on for a big profit or kind of develop him further. It's as long as it's not like a Chelsea situation where it's a club that just is a loan factory and doesn't really keep track of their players, it should be fine.
And going back to before you came stateside, is there a similar situation of a young, talented Englishman that was getting such attention that you recall or you think this relates to?
I mean, I wish. As unfortunately, English players have had a great fear of going abroad for several years. It's only really since Jadon Sancho went to Dortmund that people have gone, oh yeah, that can happen again.
And is that by and large because of the way the system exists in England, that players don't need or have that calling to go to another country?
I think it's a cultural thing. We go to Spain habitually, and then our idea of blending in with the locals is to speak English but louder, and then look at them funny when they either don't know what we're saying or they speak a better level of English than we do.
All right, so the big question that's been running around in my head since all of this came out is who is going to replace Bryan Reynolds at right back, assuming that he's not here. And to your point, Buzz, hopefully they are actually planning in this manner.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a long list, and I think of possibilities, and I think my answer might surprise you, perhaps, and it might surprise Dan, perhaps. And
if it's the answer that I'm hoping you don't say, it will horrify me.
Yeah, it might even surprise some listeners. My guess, my instincts, are that Emma Tuamase will be your right back at the beginning of the season.
Really?
Yep, that's my take.
Now, what is that? Is that just like a weird gut feeling since you haven't had a chance to go watch these guys train, or is that based on some sort of super secret Buzz insight?
There's a tiny bit of that latter, but most of it is because I don't know if you remember. It was about a year ago where Luchi talked up the idea of Emma Tuamase playing right back. They even tried it in a couple scrimmages. And one reason they sent him back to the Austin Bold was that he was going to play right back for the Austin Bold. And he played right back for maybe 3 or 4 games. And then because he's too good, they shifted him up to right wing mostly. So the other side of the coin is that, in my opinion, from watching North Texas play, Eddie Munjoma is not ready for Major League Soccer. He needs games. Now, if he had a really intensive spring and they really put him under the grind, could they get him ready for opening day? Could you go with that and survive in Major League Soccer? I mean, probably, but I think he needs another half a season with North Texas. Munjoma does, and most importantly, Luchi loves attacking outside backs. Right, his whole system is built on the success of such players. Now, when they go on the road and he panics, sometimes he puts the Brisson out there. But I think the general plan will be for it to be an attacking right side backs. Munjoma fits that bill, but that's why it won't be, I don't think, in the plans to be somebody like Brisson. We've seen the Hollingshead idea work, but then you get Nelson on the left. Not that we don't think he's fine as a defender, of course, but he's not there yet. So I think they're going to go with Emma Tuamase in the beginning, and if it's cratering and burning and it's just flat out horrible, then you'll go back to Hollingshead right, Nelson left as your second choice, because Munjoma still is not ready in my mind.
Well, I was hoping you did not say Hollingshead, because my recollection is that he's a disaster anytime he plays on the right versus the left. And then my second question or follow-up to what you just said is, does that mean Munjoma will be in the 18 starting next season, or he's not even ready for that yet?
Well, he'll play a lot for North Texas, I think. So that may limit him from time to time from being in the 18. But also the 18-man roster, if they go back to 18, presuming that they will post-pandemic, they might take it bigger. You kind of have to. A lot of times the 18 is going to depend on your potential needs subbing. So like if Hollingshead is your left back and Tuamase is your right back, you're probably going to have Johnny Nelson, who's your more experienced outside back on the bench, because he's the guy you can bring in defensively to shore things up, right? Whereas Munjoma, you can't really count on for that. Where you might see Munjoma on the bench if they think, oh, here's a game where I feel confident we're going to be okay, and now maybe I can bring him in for 10 or 15 minutes. That's when you'd see Munjoma rotate in on the bench. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, I'm expecting him to start pretty much every game for North Texas through, let's say, the middle part of the season, or until they deem him, yes, he's actually ready. And then, of course, it'll be a real competition between him and Tuamase, depending on how good Tuamase is doing. That's the way I see it going.
All right. So for people listening to the pod that aren't familiar with, is it pronounced Munjoma?
Munjoma.
Dan and or Buzz, whoever would like to tell us a little bit about his game and what we should expect out of him.
Dan, have you seen him enough? Do you want to go?
I haven't actually seen a whole lot of him. You've definitely been following him since college.
Yeah, he's a very capable attacking outside back. He's so good, in fact, in college anyway, that SMU basically just completely abdicated the entire right half of the field to him. They played like a full lopsided formation with like no right wing at all, like Dallas did against Seattle, where Ryan went and ran into the middle and played in the middle the whole game. They did that every game with Munjoma because he could basically play the whole right side by himself. Now, That's college, though. That's not Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer, he's not ready to do that by any stretch of imagination. So we've only seen him. He got hurt a little bit by the COVID situation in the sense that he couldn't go back and forth for North Texas. Eventually, they quarantined him and sent him down just to sort of give him like a 6-game run at the end of the season. So he needs more of that. And he's such a good attacker that they put him in at the last couple of games. Eric Quill started him as a right wing instead of a right back. So the potential is there. He has a lot of the skill sets that'll fit Luchi ball. That's one reason why they drafted him. And he can even do it on the left side as well. So he's a very versatile player in that sense. And that's one reason why they signed him as a homegrown in the first place. He's just not up for like the level of play and the minutes and the skill level needed yet for MLS, whereas Tuamasi we've seen actually capable of playing in MLS at a reasonable level. So he's ahead of Munjoma, if you get what I mean. Like there'll be the speed of the MLS and the speed of the tactical shapes for Munjoma are not there yet. He's only been in camp for a year, if you will, with FC Dallas, and that's not enough compared to, say, Bryan, who was here for 3.5 years before he played, and Tuamasi, who's been here for 3 years. It's a big difference.
Okay, so just to kind of sum up the Bryan Reynolds situation, do you have an idea of when you think this will start to really happen? And my second question is it possible that this will get such a big deal it will start to eclipse the $10 million transfer fee?
Well, I think it's only going to take a couple of weeks. Having them already have official offers in, of course the holidays might disrupt that a little bit. Like, so you might throw out the week of Christmas and New Year's Eve as being part of that 2 weeks in a sense. So, beyond early into January, I don't see it past that first week of January at most. And could it eclipse 10 million? I think it's going to have a chance. I think it probably doesn't eclipse 10 million because FC Dallas likes to complicate these things. They really do. It's incredible. They like to put in sell-on clauses. They like to attach, take another guy on loan. They like to overly complicate these things, and it slows it down a little bit, and it can affect the price a little bit. We'll see.
Is that a Zanata thing, or is that a Hunt thing?
It's a Hunt thing. I mean, it's a Hunt thing, and Zanata does it because the Hunts want it. They want to develop the program, and they have some guys they need to find a place to play. Some, and the whole model is to produce these young kids and then sell them. Right, that's the whole thing now. So it's like if they can send over, a Richards to Bayern and as a tag along. I mean, that's a bad example because there was no primary player going to Bayern. But like if they could tag along a player to play for your U19s or something, or if they can mix that in, or if they can mix on a sell-on clause. I mean, I don't know 100% of any of the specifics in this case. I just know Dallas loves that stuff. So it always, think about how when I said Reggie's deal was basically done, and then it took like another 3 weeks because Dallas complicated it up. They kept trying to do all this stuff, so it's what they do.
Well, and to be fair to the Hunts, that may actually work out in their favor now that it looks like Boa Vista is already getting calls about Reggie elsewhere in other clubs.
Yeah, I can't complain about protecting your own interests. And basically, they're making a bet on their player making it and becoming like a big deal. I mean, there's a sell-on percentage in Richards' deal. There's a sell-on percentage in Reggie's deal. They always think they're always betting that their guy is going to come good and be worth. Like in Reggie's case, what were they already? They were already telling Porto and Benfica the price was 10. And in that case, because Dallas has 50%, it needs to be that high for them to make their money. But the same is true with Richards. They knew that there was a better chance that he'd be sold than it would that he would break into Bayern Munich's team, because Bayern Munich's team is ridiculous. And when they need a player, they go sign somebody for $70 million. They don't. I mean, not 70. That's ridiculous for Bayern. $20 million for Bayern. But still, rather than some kid. I mean, they're playing him a little bit, but without being privy to Bayern Munich's garbage and internally, I shouldn't say garbage. But Bayern Munich's stuff internally, for all I know, they're just shop-windowing the guy, hoping that they can sell him for 5 or 6 or 10 million to get back half of the 20 million they're going to spend on. Well, I don't know what they paid for Sancho as an example, but These things are all much bigger and much more complicated. And I don't blame Dallas. It's probably really smart of them to get these sell-on clauses and bet on their young players. It just complicates things. And like once they agree to a price, let's say hypothetically, if they agree $10 million, Dallas will then say, okay, how about 8 and you give us 50%? You know what I mean? So it slows it down.
You also have to consider with those as well, just the the way the market works, the kind of undervaluing of certain players, like Reggie for like the $3 million or what it is, because he's American. Well, take Ben Chilwell as an example. He got sold for $55 million. He's not a world-class player, but because he's an English player moving from an English club to another English club, there's that massive rise in costs. So what they're really, as much as gambling on the player, they're gambling on the market itself to say, hey, look, buying a player from Portugal costs more than it does from the US, and buying a player from Germany costs a hell of a lot more than it does from the US.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I watched a couple of those Boa Vista games with Reggie. That league does not look better than MLS to me. So why a week before he was worth $2.5 million and now he's worth $10 million? It's just visibility to the European clubs. Of course, Boa Vista being greedy, but it's how it works. MLS players, American players aren't worth as much, quote unquote, as European players, and Portuguese players, and you know what I mean. So that's all part of it.
Fun fact. You mentioned the experiment with Mateo Marseille to put him at the back. Do you remember the second part of that experiment?
Oh, it has slipped my mind. What was the second part?
It was turning Bryan Reynolds into a left back.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was the Sevilla game where Bryan came on at right back, then switched over to left so Emma could play right.
Well, speaking of Bryan and being versatile, he went to I want to say it was a U18 U.S. national team camp one time, and they played him the whole camp and at every game as a center back because he's big and powerful and can pass pretty well. So it just depends on where you value. I mean, look at what Chris Richards is. We all think he's a center back, and Byron keeps playing him as a right back and a left back. So it just depends.
I have a fun fact.
Okay.
I have it on a good source that Bryan splurged and bought himself both a PS5 and a new Xbox for Christmas.
Well, he can afford it.
He's lucky enough just to be able to get one.
Well, he's got connections now because he's big bad Bryan. I want to move on to another player that was in the headlines this week and provide the listeners some insight and some facts that are tied around him, because I get every time his name comes up and people start having weird they don't get their facts right in terms of history. It's all tied to Weston McKennie, who scored just a fartin' absolute golazo in the Champions League for Juventus this week, and it was such a great feel-good moment, and I hope everybody listening to this pod that has any ties to Dallas or this club understand how kick-ass that is that happened this week. But then, after the fact, there's all this misinformation and factual inaccuracies about his ties to FC Dallas that I wanted to clarify, and then also provide some information about solidarity payments and training payments. So, Buzz, help everybody get on the same page about the history of Weston McKennie and FC Dallas and his contractual situation and what the Hunts could and could not have done, please.
Yeah, well, essentially, when he was coming up out of the academy, this was before the homegrown system had really kicked into effect for FC Dallas. We talk a lot about protect your investment signings. Well, the reason that the club does those is because of Weston McKennie. Before that, they hadn't really ever thought about signing a guy that was like 15, 16, 17 years old. It wasn't really even, a thought of. Their thought was guys will go to college and then we'll bring them back a year or two later and they'll be ready to be a player. And that's sort of the way they were working with homegrown players. And Weston got into some of the youth national teams and particularly was outstanding and went over to some European tournaments and was like MVP. And that's, of course, where he gets spotted, where he gets scouted. And so Dallas was essentially like slow playing him, let him go to college, and then we'll talk to him and see how it goes. And once Schalke came in with Schalke's money, and listen, Schalke's not even crazy money. Schalke's just mid-table Bundesliga money. Once they came in, then Dallas was like, oh crap, you sure you don't want to sign for us? And it was too late. It was already over. Like, you can't, even if they'd have gotten in ahead of time and like had discussed in Weston, and they didn't, that's their fault. But even if they had, homegrown deals run from about somewhere in the, like, they can be as low as like 40, 50,000, but that's really rare. The bottom end is usually more like 70,000 a year, and they go up to like 120, maybe 140 if they escalate a little bit. Well, that's not the kind of money that German teams are bringing to the table. There's just once Schalke came in, FC Dallas had no chance. So it was they slow played the kid and they blew it. And even if they hadn't slow played him, the German money, because he had to wait till he's 18. Whether he would have waited till he was 18 or not is an interesting question. But the minute the German money came in, it was over.
Yeah, I think another way to tell the story, to be fair to Dallas, is that they probably misread or misjudged the situation versus slow play. Because slow play to me means they were hedging their bets that he was never going to get that kind of offer from a European club. And my read on it is they just misread the situation and played their hand, and it didn't go their way. But to your point, while theoretically there is no real limit, like they could have offered him whatever contract they wanted to. They'd have to, do some of the MLS machinations to make that math work. Yeah. There is no real limit they could have paid him, but at the end of the day, there was no amount of money Dan and Clark could have put down in front of Weston McKennie to get him to stay, just simply because he had always had his eyeballs on the opportunity to go to Europe and how that ultimately would vastly improve his career path versus staying in Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, you remember as a kid, he lived in Germany and played in Germany. The slow play might be the wrong adjective, but they were sure that he was going to be here in America. And as I say, the idea of signing teenagers wasn't really on the front of the brain back then for FC Dallas.
Well, certainly not at that level.
Not at the kind of money that he ended up getting. And I don't even know the details of the money. I just know that it was significantly better than what FC Dallas could put on the table. You get weird exceptions to the homegrown money when, like, Jordan Morris is a famous example. Like, he got paid so much money as a homegrown that he couldn't be on the usual roster protected portion that homegrowns fit on the salary cap, which is the bottom 10 players that don't count. Morris got so much money because you remember he made the national team when he was still at Stanford, right? So he got paid like a big fat, probably even a DP level money. So you can do that. It just puts them on the top half of the senior roster, which defeats a lot of the purpose of the homegrown contracts and the homegrown signings, which is the fact that you can pay them these mid-$100,000 contracts if you want, and have them be on the portion of the roster that's set aside for guys that make $40K, the non-roster, non-salary cap protection part. So it's possible to do it, but even if they'd have given him $400,000, I still don't think that he's going to take that over what the German clubs can offer him, and bring to the table. It's just, monetarily speaking, they blow MLS out of the water. And in terms of the cachet and the dream of playing in Europe, you can't touch it. They have no chance.
Yeah, I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth here, because part of the reason why I want to tell this story is to defend the Hunts and FC Dallas about how this went down. And at the same time, there is a level of justified criticism they should get in how they misread the situation, because certainly, guys, it's Major League Soccer. If there's a player that good that they want to remain in the league, they'll figure out some sort of machination, i.e. Jordan Morris, to allow that to happen. I just don't think the Hunts and or FC Dallas in that moment really quite understood how good he was, at least enough that he ended up getting offers to go to Europe, which were, and by the time that was done, was way more than they were ever willing to spend in the first place.
Yeah, I don't think they recognize this talent level. Like, that's definitely clear. Yeah.
So the other part of this, and Dan, I don't know what your knowledge level about this is. The other part of that I just want to say is because I want to make clear there was no limit. I keep seeing people say, well, the Hunts couldn't pay this amount of money. They could have. They just didn't get to that point. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that fact as well, too. Fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, it was, as Buzz said, it was purely down to how you factored him into the roster. The limit is 125 grand to keep them in the supplemental roster as a homegrown. Jordan Morris, I think they were trying to, Seattle initially were trying to angle to get it raised to 250 grand, and I think MLS were like, no, you've got to put him in your regular roster.
Right.
But that's kind of, so the only kind of limit as such would be if there was any, and this would be one of the cases of penny pinching, is if the Hunts are like, well, we'll pay him 160, 170, which still Schalke would beat 3 or 4 times over, and then, but we don't want to count it against the salary cap. That
Right.
would be the kind of nickel and diamond aspect.
Yeah, and again, just to be clear, the kid was never going to sign with Dallas. He knew there were people in his ear saying there are things coming, and he just was never going to do it. And that doesn't mean he doesn't like the club or respect his time here or value it. It just, he had a different path, and so everybody should just know on balance that's how all of that went down. Now, the part I really wanted to include you in on, Dan, was this conversation that's now come up because of the fact that Juve it has put in for a permanent transfer fee from Schalke on Weston McKennie, what that means back to Dallas in terms of payments. Because, now with the change in attitude about solidarity payments and training payments, some of the facts and figures around that, because, immediately when this news broke, I think everybody's dollar signs started appearing in everybody's eyeballs. And there are some very clear rules around what those things are. They're 2 separate things, and how that would apply to Weston. So are you in agreement with me that solidarity payments are limited to 5% of whatever the transfer fee is?
That's correct.
And it only applies and only applies per se on international transfers from one country to another. So this applies. So that works in this case. Mm-hmm. And then the training payments is a different thing altogether. Oh, by the way, and works from the ages between 12 to 23. Solidarity payments could go on through the remainder of the player's career. On the other hand, training payments also work from the ages of clubs the player played for from 12 to 23, but stop at the age of 23, and is a locked-in value based on some sort of tiering system FIFA has for clubs. Did you know that?
Yes. It's a big thing, actually, with Luton right now. We've got Tier 2 academy status and are having to build... It's like this whole deal about how far the main pitches from the changing rooms and all this crazy dumb stuff.
Do you know what FC Dallas? I know FC Dallas is not a Category 1. In fact, there are no CONCACAF clubs listed as Category 1. Is Dallas a Category 2 or Category 3 club? Do we know?
I don't know what the FIFA categories are. I just know in England what the FA categories are.
All right. Well, the payment for either one of those, if Dallas was considered a Category 2, would be a $40,000 payment. If it's a Category 3, it would be a $10,000 payment. And those will only paid twice, once upon the player's transfer from one country to another, and then a second time on his subsequent sale to a second club. So all of that to say that if, in fact, the Weston McKennie to Juve deal goes down for some bajillion dollars, the money back to Dallas, well, let me put it this way. The money back to whatever clubs Weston played for between the ages of 12 and 23 would be limited to 5% of the transfer fee and approximately somewhere between $10,000 and $40,000 in training payments. What I'm not clear on is when Weston joined FC Dallas. Was FC Dallas his only club starting at the age of 12, or was he not playing for a club for Texans or Solar somewhere right about the time he came over to FC Dallas?
He'd actually moved from Germany, so that
I thought he had spent some time with another club before he came to FC Dallas in the area, in the Classic League. Am I wrong about that? Buzz?
I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest with you. Most people that have been tweeting about him said he played here for 7 years for FC Dallas, but I don't have any information, Peter. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. For somewhere in there, I swear I've heard the story that he started with either Solar or Texans or Andromeda or somebody, and then got I don't know what the right word is, stolen or signed or lured over to FC Dallas. And the reason why that's important is both training and solidarity payments are then split between whatever clubs he played for in those age groups, based on how many years. So if he played for Dallas for 6 years, and just to make it up, Texans for 1, whatever that amount of money is would be paid appropriately. Now, the other question I have, maybe Dan, you know this better than I do, or Buzz, you know.
He played for Solar, by the way.
He did. Okay. I knew it was somebody like that. The question I have is, because this is so new for American clubs, I think the big question mark is, what is that process? We've heard the story that Juve called Dallas and said, what is your expectations in terms of a solidarity payment? And I think that's because they're so used to that in the terms of transferring a player. They thought that was the proper process, but I'm not sure we know what the proper execution of that is here in the United States. Do you guys know what that is yet?
Well, I'm not sure 100% that MLS knows. They just last year decided that they were going to pursue them. So I think they're probably learning as we're learning how it all works.
Yeah.
Well, and you've also got the US soccer aspect, because US soccer were the ones that were trying to say, it was around the time Clint Dempsey moved to Tottenham. And Spurs got in touch with the league, and they were like, hey, we're just going to give you guys we want to sort this out. But the fact that he played in college then made it slightly confusing, because US soccer said, well, if Spurs give any money that would be due to Furman, then that becomes a labor law issue.
Well, my question is do clubs, wherever they are, and maybe you can relate this to Luton or something, is it the club's responsibility to apply for these payments, or are they just automatically assumed by the buying club and they are by law having to pay them?
Yeah, it's a duty-bound thing. As the transfer is complete, the buying club has to get in touch and handle that. Otherwise, the training clubs or the clubs that are due a payment of some form can lodge a protest and have that player effectively suspended.
Interesting. So the other question I have is, if the club like Dallas has a sell-on clause like they do for Reggie, does that in some way negate solidarity payments?
Boy, I don't know. My instinct is no, because it's a separate. Because essentially let's talk about Reggie, for example. Essentially, he's co-owned by FC Dallas and Boa Vista, basically.
Right.
So it's like whoever owns the player when they sell him pays the solidarity. So FC Dallas, in a way, is going to own solidarity to themselves, and Boa Vista is going to own their 50% of the solidarity to FC Dallas. Does that make sense? That's the way I read it. But I've never occurred to me to actually ask that question with these sell-on percentages. I don't know.
And obviously with Weston, there is no sell-on because there was no deal.
Right.
Weston, Weston never was a professional player for the club. Any value they get is from a solidarity and or training payment that they may get. Now, if he ends up getting transferred to Juve, what's the running number that I'm seeing? Is it like $25 million or something?
21, I think, was the...
Yeah, I mean, 5% of that's still a pretty significant chunk of money and may help a little bit in realizing you never made any money off the kid to begin with.
Well, especially right now with Major League Soccer losing the money that it's losing. I mean, there was a quote from Garber in the State of the League thing, because somebody asked him about the NBA giving $30 million to each of their teams to sort of get ready for the season. And he said, well, it would be nice to have that kind of money laying around that we could give to our teams. But even if we did, $30 million would not solve the debt problem for most of our teams. So that means that most teams in MLS, last year lost more than $30 million. So you can imagine even just FC Dallas being more frugal than others, perhaps didn't lose as much as some of the others did. So you can imagine what a sale like this is going to do in terms of balancing the books this year.
Yeah, I wondered if that's like a median number that he's laying across, because I find it hard to believe that FC Dallas is $30 million behind in the books just because of this season.
Well, no, it was the idea of like if you gave $30 million to every team, and he said it would not solve the problem for most of our teams. So I doubt that Dallas is down $30 million because they don't spend that kind of money. They're much more frugal than that. I'm just saying the big picture.
Or an LAFC who's had no attendance at all this season.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah,
with the league in whole losing over $1 billion, it's like even for a team that runs a small budget like FC Dallas, any kind of player sale or any kind of solidarity is going to go a long way to making things continue to function for the club, given that they're furloughing people and having players take pay cuts and all that crap like everybody else in the world is doing right now.
Well, this is certainly more of the fun conversation to have. We've never really kind of gotten into it at this level. We've all been anticipating it, but now it's finally here. And
I mean, we're learning just like everybody else. You know, this is new to us for this in this club. The club's learning.
Well, I certainly have spent an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out, the ins and outs of solidarity payments and training payments, and I learned a lot in the last few days, but I'm sure there's much more to learn, and we'll, kind of ride the train together, as they say. All right, so let's move on to the club itself. The season is over. Before we know it, the new season's going to start. Garber is insisting it's going to happen in March, and the Players Association is like, hold on a minute. Let's see if we can wrestle. But I guess that will all be, determined at some near point as to when it'll start. But one of the things that I've wondered about in thinking and reflecting on the season for Dallas is how much do you think – I think this is a two-part question. How much do you think internally the Hunts and Luchi and Zanata just consider 2020 a write-off season? And how much should we consider 2020 to be just a season to write off because of all the COVID and oddities and all those things?
I think they'll write it off a little bit in terms of evaluating big picture. Like it's tough to evaluate fairly Luchi, and maybe even tough to fairly evaluate Zanata. Certainly on the business side, you can't evaluate squat because it's so different than everything else. So like those big picture macro level things, I'll get thrown out the window. But on the small level, in terms of player performance or learning to win on the road or anything else you want to come up with, even when you want to look at the performance of the team, everybody played in the same league, everybody played in the same COVID. So, you still have to look at where the team finished and where they are in the greater picture of the standings. You still can look at their poor offense. You can still look at their pretty good defense. So all those things are enough that you can build and go forward. Just some of the big picture lessons are probably lost.
Dan, when you look at 2020, how do you use it as a measuring guide for Luchi Gonzalez as the manager?
You look at it really from the aspect that Luchi talks about challenges and embracing them and putting players in discomfort. That's what the whole season was, and so if you write that off, you're forgetting any lesson that could be learned from that. Whether it was playing in empty stadiums or having your schedule dicked about and going to 2 games a week, not having those full microcycles that they love to talk about. You've got to embrace that and say, look, if that was a valid season like any other. So every team had to deal with the same adversity. This is where FC Dallas finished, and this is where, and you want to kind of take a step further. You don't want to look at 2019 and say, okay, well, this is the continuation of that, because you've got a different team. You've got changes to, what we know Luchi Ball as, and Luchi's secondary plans, which aren't, that Luchi Ball model, I guess, which he embraces quite often. It would just be a mistake to, in any sense, just write off as an asterisk season.
So, Buzz, knowing how 2020 went down, and this being Luchi's second year as a professional coach, or a coach of a professional team, I think your point of view is interesting because you spent the first year pretty close to Luchi, seeing him on a regular basis, watching his practices go down, kind of understanding from a first point of view. Now you've had a second season where that's been absent. You've not been able to go to practice and talk to the players and talk to Luchi on a one-on-one basis. Has your perspective on Luchi changed at all in terms of his skill sets, what he's good or bad at, or do you now have just more questions about Luchi after this season?
I think my assessment of him has not changed dramatically. A couple of the things that I was a little bit worried about are basically still things I'm a little bit worried about. And the things that I still like quite a bit. So it's kind of the same in that regard. I have noticed that his perspective has changed, however, because he was clearly hired with a play the kids mantra to be the extension of the academy to the first team. And tactically, that's still true. But whether through Zanata's influence or Luchi's own influence, and it's probably a combination of both, they clearly have decided really quickly, after basically one season, that play the kids doesn't work, that you can't just play kids and win, that you have to have a team made up of veterans in the prime of their career if you want to try and compete and get ahead. There still is a mix of kids. They still will play a kid if the kid rises to the level of the game, but you can't just play kids. Now I say that, and then they went and finished basically like one position better in the standings. So it'll be interesting to me watching this winter going into the spring. Hopefully by then we can go back to training. It'll be interesting to see how Luchi changes between season 2 and season 3, because the season 1 to 2 progression was we got to get some veterans. So what's the next progression? Is there going to be a progression where he looks at, honestly, it's the last 4 years of this team have been 7th twice and 6th once, which isn't as good as their historic record says they should be. So is he going to look in the mirror, or is he going to look at his team and say, here's a progression we need to make and a direction we need to go? And hopefully we can talk going forward here in a minute of how that might articulate itself along some lines that we would like it to be. And there's some interesting problems in this team, and it'll be interesting to me to see if he recognizes the problems that we recognize, or if he sees some problem that we've missed and has a different solution. And then, of course, over the course of the season, if his solutions work, it'll be fun.
All right. May I be so bold as to put you on the spot and ask you what the things you do and don't like about Luchi are?
Sure. I really like his desire to play with very modern tactics. I really like that. His dream to replicate what Pep and Liverpool and do with the high pressing and the flying outside backs and the build forward and possession game. I love the modern way that he plays. I don't like that maybe he doesn't recognize that he doesn't quite have the talent for it in the team. That bothers me a little bit. I'm worried that he puts value on player contracts in terms of selection. It bothers me that Frank O'Hara is chosen over Cobra when Cobra was playing better. It bothers me that Brian Acosta comes back from an injury and walks right back into the lineup because he's a DP. It bothers me that Santi Mascarera comes back from an injury, and I didn't say fit because he never gets fit, but he comes back from an injury, and because of the DP, he walks right into the lineup. So that bothers me a little bit. I'm wondering if that's a trend to watch for, because, and the same is true even with Brisson. Why does Brisson play 3 or 4 games at right back when Reggie left before Brian came in? I mean, how good is Bryan Reynolds, right? The kid is ridiculous. Why in the world did it take 3 or 4 games for him to play, and why you're playing Brisson out of position? Was it because Brisson gets paid $500,000 and he deserves an opportunity or something? I don't understand it. So that's the thing that worries me the most. I appreciate that He does not give up on people. He will keep a guy in training and keep working with him. Cobra's a great example. He did not give up on Cobra last year. I gave up on Cobra a month in, even before the season started probably, but a month into the season I was done. Luchi didn't give up on him. And in the end, he got him to play and got him to be a big helper and a big component of the team at the end. So that's good. I like that he's a teacher and tries to develop people and progress people. I think he's a little bit preachy and a little bit long-winded, and I think players, especially veteran players, will tune out. That worries me a little bit. So I think that's about it. That's a pretty deep positive, negative influence. And one more thing, I do like that Luchi is always self-analyzing and always looking to improve and does recognize his own failures and successes. Both of those things I think are positive.
All right, so Dan, I'm interested in your point of view of the point that Buzz brought up about playing DP players when maybe they shouldn't be played. Do you think that is A sign of a very immature and inexperienced manager, or B, the pressure being put on him from above?
I think it's a little bit of inexperience and a little bit of pressure from above. You think?
So that would be C, both A
both.
and B. Yeah.
What did I say?
You said A and B. You kind of went with both. So
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
saying that would be C.
Okay.
I was just being, sorry.
Okay. Damn it! You made me lose my track. Yeah, I think one thing is, when Luchi was under 17s coach, his week is dictated by the 19s, and the first team, and anything above of, we're going to take these players up. You've got these, or if there's a player that somebody wants to particularly look at, hey, this player's playing in your team this week, which is fine. He can do that to Eric Quill. That's the whole point of a development team. That's not the point of a first team. As the coach, he is the guy that's supposed to pick the team based on merit and merit alone. So yeah, there is definitely an element of that. I think everybody and their grandmother has identified at one point or another this season, particularly the Cobra example being the most egregious. But one thing I think it's worth adding to what Buzz said about the tactical side of things. I like that he has a plan B. One of the biggest things that everyone complained about Oscar was it was 4-2-3-1 counter-attack. Never changed. He thought about a 4-4-2 1 week. Gave it up. Never went back. Luchi reacts in-game. It might be ugly at times. It might be that first half against Nashville or Real Salt Lake or Portland. It might be going to a 3-5-2 and then not liking it and then tweaking it, coming back to it a year later and finding a little more success. But that in itself is a coach developing a style, which is an encouraging thing for this team, particularly a young team that can be molded in such a way.
All right. So, anything else, Buzz, you want to add about Luchi? I know. At some point in a future podcast or in your Patreon stuff, you'll probably get to more detailed about it. But is there anything else, just kind of overview about Luchi's season that you want to throw in there?
Not particularly. We talked about last week the idea that he sees Jesus in himself, and I think Jesus and Paxton now with their new salaries sort of qualify into that group of guys that are. Listen, you get paid a lot of money because you're good, theoretically. So it's, I'm not saying it's necessarily the salary. I'm just saying sometimes it seems like there's an influence there, and that worries me. I think overall, I like the direction Luchi's trying to push the team. It'll be interesting to see if he can get the pieces he needs and continues to push it.
All right, so one of the themes for the upcoming next season that I think is the most fascinating, and you alluded to this a little bit in your kind of review of Luchi, Buzz, is this idea that at some point the Hunts, Zanata, and Luchi all have to come to an agreement as to what the plan is in terms of what the best starting 11 looks like, and I feel like there's this fracture that's happened between the play the kids idea, right, which maybe wasn't working very good, and then shifting dramatically over to relying on your DPs and or veteran talent from other countries, which they really kind of went to later. And where do you think ultimately, Buzz, this is going to land? Because I think this is the biggest question about the club.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a mix. The key to making it work will be that the guys that you sign as homegrowns between the ages of 15, which they haven't really done very much, but 15 to say 23 when they come out of college, depending on where you get these homegrowns, somewhere in there, those guys are not ready for Major League Soccer yet. Now you get Paxton and Jesus eventually get there. Tanner got there earlier. Bryan Reynolds got there, at 19. That's kind of where your best guys, 18, 19 years old. Like the guys that aren't in that mix, a lot of them, North Texas doesn't make a lot of sense for. North Texas isn't quite good enough. North Texas is good in a lot of ways because working with Quill is good in a lot of ways. But you got to figure out how to play these guys and where to play these guys. So that's going to be the big question mark in terms of development, because by bringing in these veterans, which they obviously have decided they must have a mix of them, there's a lot less places to play. Like look what happened to Brandon Cervania and Edwin Cerrillo this last year. So you got to figure out a balance with that part, because I think they've figured out a balance with the veterans, because some of the veterans they've started to bring in, the biggest example is Andres Ricarte. Is not 30-something. He's 28, 29. So that's a little bit of a change, actually, And if they're going to go that route and they're going to try and lop off some of the top, Zico's going to be gone. Some of these mid-30s guys, it'll be interesting to see how that mix continues to go forward. They're going to have to sign some people this winter. So it'll be the ages of the players they bring in and the level of the players they bring in are going to tell us a lot about this new direction and how much it's going to stick.
All right, but Dan, isn't really one of the biggest talking points about the 2020 season is the fall off of production of youth on this team? And and obviously Paxton, you kind of have to set off on the side because it's an injury situation. But I'm thinking of Brandon Cervania's fall off of form and Cerrillo's lack of playing time. Those types of players, and how all of this mixes together, that if the whole point of this club is to build and grow and sell off, if they can't get those guys to convert because they've also spent a lot of money on other midfielders or somebody in that same position, how is this all going to finally work together?
In many ways, it doesn't. Not everyone on that production line is going to turn around and turn into cash for FC Dallas.
But let me ask you, but hold up, while you think about that answer, I want to throw in one element. How do you know they won't work out if you don't give them the time? Like, is Brandon Cervania not turning into a regular starter because he's not playing regularly because you've got some guy you spent a lot of money to bring in here or paying a lot of money instead?
Well, I mean, hopefully, the reason is because he's just not doing it in training and that somebody else is. And it's tough on that aspect because that's the part that fans never see.
And we don't either, obviously. Now.
We haven't this year. Oh, and I'll give you the perfect example is David Teixeira. When people used to say, why do they persist with him? Why is he still playing? Why? And then I'd go to training every week without fail, and he would put in a world-class performance. But then come game day, it just wasn't happening for him. It just wasn't clicking. And, Pereira at that point was hoping that what he was doing 5 days a week would translate into the sixth. We know when Cervania and Cerrillo had that big switch last year, when Cervania took over the job, it was because of what he was doing in training compared to Cerrillo.
And you could use Tanner as an example. This year, he earned a contract in training, and then he earned playing time in training, and earned starts in training. He's
Cerrillo, he wasn't even on the radar last year.
But here, I do think it's a fair question, and Tanner is really the best example. If Bryan Acosta was fully healthy and playing at whatever form level you want to judge, do you think is there any real, is it realistic to think that Tanner would have started that playoff game in Seattle over Bryan Acosta?
No, because Tanner wouldn't have might not have gotten the spring training invite if Acosta hadn't been hurt, and then he wouldn't have started the first 2 games if Acosta hadn't been hurt.
I just mean at the end of the season when he got, he's on the roster, right?
Yeah. No, you remember when we talked about the preview of the first game against Timbers, I actually talked about the idea that, Acosta was going to be on the bench, and then going into Seattle, I was afraid he was going to start in Seattle until we found out that he hurt himself in the Timbers warm-up, because we knew that Luchi would look to the guy that's played in the World Cup instead of an 18-year-old, so it's entirely reasonable. And that's what we talked about, the balance, right? They have decided clearly that in order to win in this league, they need middle of career veterans, somewhere between 24 to 30, because that's the guys they've gone out and tried to get the last year or two, and it escalated this year. So if your idea is still play the kids, either you can only play them if they get good enough to demand time, like Paxton clearly does, or if you find another place to play them. That's what I was talking about. It's like they got to figure, because the organizational philosophy is about these kids and coming through the academy, and yet the first team is not. There's a disconnect there that they have to solve.
Yeah, and that's what I find so maddening about this whole organization is I just don't understand internally how they think. I have to assume there's a mission statement or some sort of plan that they're all working off of. I just can't sort it out in my head how they see this working if they need to get the Tanner Tessmans and Brandon Cervanias and Cerrillos of the world time on the field, yet at the same time, they is the goal to win MLS Cup? Is the goal to put the best mix of things together, and if we happen to win MLS Cup, that's groovy? That's where I'm very, very confused as to how they see all of this working.
Yeah, I think that they have 2 organizational goals that are not necessarily in sync with each other. There's clearly this organizational goal to be this pipeline to make players and sell them. It's also clearly an organizational goal. Now, people are going to say it's not because they don't spend money, but that doesn't mean they're not trying. Just because they're not spending doesn't mean they're not trying. They are trying to win championships. They don't do it like somebody out there might wish that they would, but that's not the same thing. Those are different things. So there's clearly a disconnect from, and it may even come from Dan and Clark. We want to sell players. We want to be a pipeline, and we want to compete to win championships. Those things may be mutually exclusive. I'm not really sure. There definitely is not synergy there for sure.
Right. And so this leads to the conversation about designated players and the signing of designated players and just how, to be honest, historically, this club isn't very good at doing it. And do you think there is something in place for them to fix that, or is that just kind of a crapshoot, although it feels like some teams are way better at it than Dallas has been?
Yeah, I feel like the attempt to fix it is Andre Zanata. The organizational philosophy is clearly value signings, where Zanata, since he's come in, he knew guys that had value that weren't too expensive. Obviously, like Santos, Thiago Santos is an example of that. He knew them from South America. Franco Jara, you can throw out the window of this conversation because that's a Dan Hunt signing. The idea historically with DPs is that they go for guys that are cheaper that might have upside. Like they were trying with Arangis to go young, and we're trying with Mosquera to go young with upside and see what happens. That's how they want a DP. This club's not going to drop, $5 million to bring Bradley back from Europe, just as a crazy example. It's not how they roll. So I think the Zanata is the fix for that, in the sense that they hope that his connections in South America and hopefully his knowledge or connections with scouting. Now, remember, FC Dallas quietly in the last few years has built up more international scouting. They've got guys working for them in other countries. They don't talk about it very much, but they do. So that's an improvement. Matter of fact, you could throw in with that, Eric Quill right now is traveling all over the place, scouting domestically all over the United States, looking for diamonds in the rough, if you will. So that's their philosophy now, is that they're hoping that they're going to be able to identify pieces that are cheaper to bring them in and become bigger, whether that's kids, whether it's North Texas, whether it's DPs. It's just how they roll. It's just what they do. So it's just be better at it. Cross your fingers.
All right, Dan. So currently for 2019, the club's 3 DPs were...
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you to recite who the 3 DPs were.
For 2020.
Yeah, yeah. This season that we just finished.
Yep. So Brian Acosta, Santiago Mosquera, and
Franco
Hara.
All right. So, is it possible? So, so now that one of those three are gone, and I know Buzz's Christmas wish list is for them to pay off Franco Hara, but I think we're all in agreement that's
Mine's
never
to
going
pay
to
off
happen.
Acosta.
And yours is to pay off Acosta. Now, yours I think is slightly more possible. Although I still find it doubtful for the Hunts to spend the money to buy that out and then turn around and spend more money to re-sign or to sign a new replacement player.
Well, I think you can trade or sell Acosta. That's what I'd like to see.
To another MLS team?
Another MLS team, or sell him to somebody wherever. I'm just saying I think it can be done.
Okay.
Still have him.
So so Dan, are you looking forward to the new season with 1 or 2 or 0 new DPs for FC Dallas?
Well, I mean, it's all going to depend, right? Because FC Dallas really has like 7 DP level salaries on the roster. So what they have to play around with, they no longer have to use the DP exemption on Pablo Aranguiz, which is nice. They'll no longer have Reto Ziegler's 800,000 on the roster. I mean, you know, we talk about Andre Zanota, but there's also Marco Ferrucci as director of soccer operations, and I know a large part of his job is to get the guys the loans, but it's also he's the one that knows MLS rules and roster regulations, and is gonna be the guy guiding Andre Zanota through this is a DP, this is a TAM signing, and everything else. So hopefully we see something. I mean, and it comes down to the same thing we said on the last pod, right? FC Dallas has a history of $1 or $2 million transfer fees that, if they didn't necessarily look at the return on investment and just said, hey, this is an investment in the quality of the team, we're not going to get this back. You can get a Valeri or someone like that. And hopefully, Zanotta's coming from a place of actually winning and can really educate him on that and kind of give him that guidance.
I thought it was interesting. I went and looked up the top 10 salaries from 2019 on the team. And number 1 was Reto, and he's now gone. Edwin Giassi was 2, and he's gone. Brian Acosta is still here. Santi Mosquera was 4, and he's gone. Christian Coleman was 5, and he's gone. Matt Hedges was 6. He's fine. Cobra, 7, gone. Brisson was 8, and they're renegotiating him, which to me means they're going to give him backup money, so it'll be less. Michael Barrios was 9. They just picked up his option. He's still here. And Pablo Aranguiz is 10, and he's gone. So, but you have to add in there, of course, Franco Hara is now tops. Pamukal and Freya are both in there now at their roughly $500,000, $600,000 a year. Santos and Mercarte are probably in there. And really, that's pretty much it. But, Ziegler, Giassi, Mosquera, Coleman, Cobra, and Aranguiz. That's 6 guys out of the top 10 from a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, are gone. The reason we looked at 2019 is because they didn't publish the salaries for 2020, probably because all these teams asked their players to take pay cuts and things are so crazy and everyone is having a tough time at home. So I imagine it was a PR decision not to publish the 2020 salaries, and they probably never will. But that's why we have to go on 2019.
Or somebody just wants to continually rub it in how much money Edwin Giassi made for nothing.
Yeah. To quit after 17 minutes. Yeah.
All right, Buzz, we're running long, I think, but I do feel like we should, at a very high level, take notice of what you believe the team's biggest must-needs in terms of positional signings will be for the 2021 season.
Well, I got a thing on this that's going to go live on the website Friday, but in the short version is that who your keeper is, who your left back is. What you're missing is the big hole at left center back, because clearly Ziegler is gone and clearly Brisson is a backup at best. That's a hole there. Athletically needs to be upgraded. Hedges is a lock. You got to replace Reynolds, but as he talked about there, that outside back is not what I call a bellwether position. It's a position where the club's not going to spend a lot of money. So you're not going to go sign some big farm player, I don't think. I think they're going to look internally first. So really the only defensive signing is left center back. So you can look at expect a foreign signing to come in, if not DP outright, close to that level with a buy down maybe. Midfield is set. You have Thiago Santos, and you have 800 million eights on this team already. It's the front line that's a disaster. So if you're stuck with Franco Jara, which you likely are for probably 2 more seasons, good Lord. Pepe at 17, going on 18. Listen, we're excited about his progression, but you can't expect that kid to start 35 games next year with Jara on the bench. It'll never happen. It'll destroy your locker room because Jara will go nuts if you do. But mainly just because that's a lot of burden on an 18-year-old kid. So they need to sign him.
Unless Franco Jara succumbed to some sort of injury.
Yeah, if he's hurt or whatever. But the bottom line is...
unfortunate accident.
Yeah. Someone clubs his knee with a pipe. Don't do that. That was a joke.
Cuts his brake lines.
Jesus Ferreira's maybe in that mix as a 9. So I think they need to sign a 9. Not a crazy DP 9, but a middle of your 20s to push Jara legitimately, because Jara doesn't look at Pepe as competition. So you need a legit competition there, like a mid-20s. Doesn't have to be great. Just needs to be somebody who can play a little bit. Cal Jennings would have been awesome. And then you need, because Barrios is getting old, the problem is I don't think that they can afford to do both a center back and a 9 and something else, because you need a wing on the left to compete with Fafa Pico. So because I don't think you can afford to sign 3 guys, because you have all these, you still have Acosta as a DP. So the problem is with Acosta on the roster as a DP still, you don't have a ton of leeway or room. You have some, but it might be difficult to get a 9 and a wing. So Barrios probably is, again, a starter on the right, as much as I wish he wasn't. Fafa Pico will compete on one of the other wings. It means you're short a wing somewhere. So I think it's very likely that between Jesus and Paxton, you're going to have to try and fill some of those roles up front. I know that we talked about the idea that with Ricarte being an 8, that you could play Paxton and Jesus in the midfield with him, like a double 8 look. But you have so many other guys and so much money in Acosta and Tanner and Cervania. There's a lot of 8s in there. So I think it's actually very likely that Jesus will go back to competing at the forward ranks, whether it be wing or whether it be a 9, and that Paxton they'll go into the spring with the idea that Paxton might be your first choice left wing, competing with Fafa Pico for that spot. I know you hate it, Peter. I'm not, but that's the thing, is like, you can't think about it like what you or I would think would happen. You have to try and think about what they're going to think that can happen and where they can spend some money and how they're handcuffed in certain areas with money. And how do you get Paxton on the field if you're playing a double 8 look and Ricarte's got to play and Acosta's a DP, so he's got to play? Where are you going to play Paxton? You got to get him on the field, don't you?
Yeah, so I got a couple of answers and solutions for you. One is you move on from Jesus Ferreira. You know what you've got in that kid. Unless he turns out some sort of unbelievable national team showing, I don't know what else more we need to know about Jesus Ferreira. Move him on. And let Paxton take that position. And I also think, there's an opportunity for them to move on from Bryan Acosta too. I think we know what we've got in Bryan Acosta, and it ain't much, and it certainly isn't what you're paying him. So there's 2 opportunities to make some space for Paxton and play him in his rightful and proper position.
No, I agree with you.
Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Yeah, that's what I would do, and I think that's what they should do, but I don't think it's what they're going to do, because I think that they spent a record-breaking transfer fee to get Acosta when they did, and that he's a DP, and he played in the World Cup, and they're infatuated with that level. And I think that they just brought in Ricarte, and those are your 2 8s. And then if you want to include Tanner Tessman in there, and you want to include Brandon Cervania in there, or you want to include Thomas Roberts in there or whatever, if you're trying to get Paxton Pomykal onto the field, it's likely going to have to be as left wing. You can throw Jesus out. That doesn't even matter. Still, how do you get Paxton into the game? Are they going to bench Acosta, a DP? Are they going to bench Ricarte to play Paxton, who's 20? No, they're not gonna.
Okay, but well, let me throw it this way to you. Well, let's say Paxton, and I kind of want to end the conversation about FC Dallas as a club with Paxton. This was in the way I had it written in my notes, which was, let's just say Paxton comes back and plays really, really well in training. Are we now back to the thing we talked about earlier, where the coach has to make a decision between playing the kid, really the local face of the club, or the guy you paid a lot of money for in a DP signing over Brian Acosta? And
Right.
Are you suggesting to me that Luchi will still go with Acosta over Paxton?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
I-
Wait, hold on. Let me follow that up. So do you believe that's because of the money and the pressure from above, or because he thinks that's what he needs in terms of leadership or something like that? If they're playing equally as well, or even if Paxton's playing better in training, why would you go with Brian Acosta if you're Luchi Gonzalez?
I think it's the C answer. It's both of those things. It's the fact that you're paying Acosta a bunch of money as a DP, and it's the fact that he's an experienced guy in the prime of his career who played in the World Cup. Now, I also think, to be fair, I don't think Paxton's competing with Brian Acosta. I think Paxton's competing with Andres Ricarte. So, I know those players kind of play the same position these days because Ricarte plays this deep 8 position. But I think that if you have everybody healthy, I think that they brought Ricarte in to play with Acosta, not to play with Pomykal. I think Pomykal either competes with Ricarte or goes and plays somewhere else. Or there's so many. I mean, listen, there's going to be shifting. There's going to be call-ups. Acosta's going to be gone for World Cup qualifying. Paxton can be gone for World Cup qualifying. All kinds of crazy-ass crap could happen if everyone's healthy. So it's never going to be like, here's 11 players that are going to start 30 games. That's not going to happen. I'm just saying that I think it's very, very likely that if you look at everybody healthy lineup and I got to get Paxton on the field, where can I do that? That right wing or left wing, probably left wing, are the most available positions that are in most. You've had a problem now for like since Castillo left, they've not had a good left wing. So why not try and fix it with Paxton?
I never, ever want my favorite athletes to be Des Bryant-like, but if there was one time I wish Paxton Pomykal was more like Des Bryant in terms of expressing himself online and on social media so that you get an idea of what's running through the kid's head, I really do wonder on a daily. I think about this almost every day. What must Paxton Pomykal be thinking and going through at this point as he looks forward to the next season?
He's probably desperate to be healthy, but I'm 100% with you, Peter. If I was in charge, it's Ricarte and Paxton in the midfield, a double 8 look, but I'm not in charge. So,
I get that. I think about, I just wonder what Paxton's thinking about in terms of his recovery. Like, we have no idea. Like, the club's not talking about it. Paxton's not talking about it. Even people who I know who know Paxton's family are being very guarded about his particular condition and status of his recovery, and we don't know anything about it. We don't know how far along he's coming, and he's got a lot. I mean, literally, the kid's career could take a dramatic turn one way or the other based on how 2021 goes.
It's actually very frightening that it's the case, that no one wants to talk about it. That's usually what happens when it's not going well. For all I know, I don't think that he's returned to physical training yet, as far as I know. I mean, I've not heard. Usually, when some guy comes back out to training, back out on the fields, we hear about it. I haven't heard that, so it's entirely possible that the beginning of 2021 is in jeopardy for that kid. We have no idea. So I imagine that he's probably really hurting and really desperate to get back and try and prove himself again. I mean, he's going to be effectively off for a year. I mean, I know he wasn't literally off for a year, but effectively it's going to be.
It's also a different situation in that every other time there's been a major injury, one of us has been asking every week, what's the status, actually out there, so that they can't just kind of ignore it. And this year it's very much been an out of sight, out of mind type deal, because obviously we're not allowed out there to practice.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want anybody to listen to this and go away with this idea that we are leaning towards the idea that his recovery is not going well.
I'm worried about it.
Well, yeah, but I do think there's a lot in what Dan is saying, which is we're not there. You guys, not me, you guys aren't at practice day in and day out pestering Luchi or somebody about his status. So that's kind of fallen by the wayside, and maybe it's time to start doing that. But at the same time, and not, again, this gets back to my Des Bryant analogy. It's not like Paxton's on Instagram posting videos of him setting his phone down in the grass and running cones or juggling the ball, right? We're not seeing any of that out of him.
Well,
not that we had before.
Is the first person to say he hates social media.
Sure. But again, that's why I wish he was more like that, Des Bryant in that way, because I feel like we'd get a little better insight. And he certainly didn't really talk about it when he was on Chum Chat, which is now one of my favorite podcasts in the whole world, by the way, guys. He didn't really he kind of avoided that whole thing there and just said it was going well. So I think that whole storyline about Paxton and what must be going through that kid's head is one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's definitely a question. He's definitely at a crossroads in a lot of ways. If he's not able to recover from this, it's going to really damage his long-term prospects.
Pressure. Okay, so anything else about FC Dallas as a on-field product that we want to discuss before we move on to our final topic of the pod?
Not for me.
All right, Dan, this is where you come in hot and heavy because you get to recap the support of local soccer in the form of the Roja League.
Yeah, it's a fun week last week. Got out to watch a couple of games as my dog drinks water really loudly in the background. So there was the Denton Derby, the very hotly anticipated one, where the Estudiantes proved yet again they have a much better roster than the actual Denton Diablos team, winning 4-1. For an FC Dallas standpoint, Ben Hale in goal, saving a penalty for the Estudiantes. The games I went to see were at Foro Sports Club in North Dallas. I was kind of excited because Premier Legends is a team that's made up. They're actually the alumni team of the FC Dallas Premier 2001 team. So that was Jesus Ferreira's team. So they actually lost 1-0 to FC Harrington on an own goal. It was very much a lesser talented side that was kicking the ever-loving crap out of Premier Legends.
George John Jr. wasn't on that team, was he?
No, okay. But crap, who was?
Don't worry about it. I'm just making funnies.
Not Emmanuel McGuire.
Is that Benilla's team, Kevin Benilla's team?
Yeah, it was Kevin Benilla's team. Yeah, he was the only good player on that team. But Premier Legends was Michael Collodi. It was Judson Burns. It was a whole lot of good young FC Dallas players. If you followed Buzz's list on who should FC Dallas sign as a homegrown next, and he lists the ones to watch, most of those players were playing for Premier Legends. And then the main event of the evening, I guess you would put it, was 4-0 featuring Michelle. Beating Fort Worth Vaqueros 3-1, and Seth Wilson, FC Dallas's best youth goalkeeping prospect in goal for Fort Worth. He did get lobbed from the sideline, but he was their only good player. Malik Henry Scott was up front for 4-0. Another current academy kid, looked really good. Good to see Michelle even roll back the years with a goal. I spoke to him after the game and he said, it's funny, it was nice to get out there, but they had so many injuries, he didn't really have a whole lot of choice. So it was kind of funny watching halfway through the second half when he realised, crap, I better put my kit on. And got changed out of his street clothes.
Wow.
But this weekend's going to go into the... there's a Fort Worth doubleheader, FC Harrington Irving at 2 p.m. on Saturday, Texas Wesleyan and Fort Worth Vaqueros and Innocentes, the Fort Worth Derby at 4 p.m. And then the Denton doubleheader is going to be fantastic. That is Estudiantes playing Premier Legends. That is going to be an incredible game at 2 p.m. And then Denton Diablo is playing 4 at 4 p.m. over at Texas Women's University.
All right. Now, I do have a question, and I think this is my level of ignorance about the Denton Diablos structure. I was of the impression Denton Diablos was the main senior team, and the Estudiantes was a thing they threw together at the last second to help fill in a needed spot when they did this last year or earlier this year.
Pretty much.
Yet it appears that the Estudiantes team is significantly better than the quote-unquote senior team.
Well, I'll explain it to you. The Denton Diablos was the original team that they have, and it was made up of college players almost entirely. And that team played in the NPSL, entirely college players, and they did good enough in the NPSL that they qualified for the U.S. Open Cup. But the college kids can't play in the U.S. Open Cup. So they created Denton Estudiantes, and they shifted all the kids, the college kids that got into the Open Cup, they shifted them all to Estudiantes and rebuilt Denton Diablos with people that can play in the U.S. Open Cup. So the real main team, the real head of this organization is worse than the Estudiantes college-age kids team that they had to create so that they could play the Denton team in the U.S. Open Cup. This is the same reason why the Vaqueros, who used to use a bunch of college kids, dumped all those kids and went with all semi-pro kids who play for the Sidekicks, et cetera, under Stavro. And they got into the U.S. Open Cup as well with that team. Of course, then Stavro left, so all those players left, and now they're terrible. But that's why there's two Denton teams and why the filler team, Estudiantes, is actually better than their main team.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing to come out of all this is just an understanding of the fine lines of just how similar all of these divisions, once you get down to this level, really are at the end of the day. And it's largely about organization and getting a couple of special players and less about what level in the pyramid you're playing at.
Yeah, Estudiantes in particular has a couple of guys that are really highly thought of college players, that have come in. They're not there every time, but they've got some of the bigger names that have played for them, and some of the better kids in the area have played for them. And so that's a really good team that was Denton Diablos and now is Denton Estudiantes. It's the same team. It's just a different name.
You can check out all that information, tickets and dates and times and all of that on their website, rojaleague.com, or is it therojaleague.com?
It's therojaleague.com.
Therojaleague.com. Okay.
And one thing as well, one thing that's really cool about this league is they are very good for broadcasting their games. So definitely check out the Facebook pages of both the Fort Worth Vaqueros and Denton Diablos. They put on a really nice, pretty professional broadcast on Facebook Live to catch those games.
Technology is rad. Okay, anything else before I begin to shill?
Well, Arturo Rodriguez landed with Phoenix Rising in the USL Championship, so that's kind of a big deal.
He'll be joining Minnick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Our good friend Minnick.
The great Jason Minnick.
Yeah, so they trumpeted that they, re-signed their MVP that they got the USL 1 MVP. So good for Arturo that he's landed a USL Championship gig.
I just want to say out loud, I really miss Jason Minnick.
Yeah.
He's a good dude, good PR guy.
Yeah. Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer 90. Soccer 90's holiday sale starts this weekend. So depending on when you're listening to this, that is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 11th, 12th, and 13th. 50 to 75% off anything you buy. And then beginning on Monday, the 14th, Third Degree listeners receive 40% off with the promo code Third Degree on soccer90.com. Just to clarify, Buzz, you can't use the promo code on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to get 90% off total if for something's marked at 50, or actually they pay you money if it's 75% off, and then you use their 40% off promo code, and they actually pay you to take gear. So that doesn't work
that's
that
how
way.
Austin sold all those jerseys.
Oh, is that how it worked?
It doesn't stack. It's not a stacking buff. No,
Only
basically
one promotion at a time.
Yeah, basically they're having the huge sale, so they turned off our December code for the weekend, and then it'll come back, and then for the rest of December, our 40% off code will still be good.
Yeah, I was looking through the website. I wish they sold shorts, because I collect shorts these days, not shirts anymore.
Wow.
Just go on eBay.
I know, but I wanted to participate in the sale and buy something from the store, and they don't sell either MLS or other global team shorts. They just don't do it.
Full kit wankering's not a thing over here.
I'm not doing that. I just like to wear them around the house, mister.
No pockets.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan, for your time and humor and insight on all those things. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Buzz, as always, props to you, my friend. Would you like to promote your Patreon now, please?
Yeah.
This is where you do this here. Go.
Right. Patreon.com/third degree. And as I tweeted out today, almost every day I do a little mini pod, 2 to 3, maybe even 8 minutes, sort of like a little dive on a topic, and it's a little bonus content for people that support us. Or if you just want to throw us $1 and just because you love what we do on the podcast straight up, that is welcome as well. So please support us, patreon.com/third degree.
Cup in hand. Thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. We will speak to you next week on another fun-filled edition of Third Degree, the podcast.
Primer got that degree.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.